Around the world, journalism is facing budget cuts, and expensive investigative projects are among the first to go. Tonight, what happens when reporting that exposes wrongdoing becomes harder to do? Welcome back to Big If True Season 2. I'm Molly Thomas. Investigative journalism is not glamorous. It's long hours filing Freedom of Information requests. It's sifting through hundreds of redacted documents. It can take months to build trust with one source and years to uncover what powerful people don't want you to see. These stories expose journalists and newsrooms to lawsuits, and yet it's essential because it forces transparency and reveals bad behavior. Remember the duplicity of Watergate? The cover-ups exposed by Spotlight, the human horrors of Abu Ghraib. Think about the secrets in the Panama Papers, the scandals out of the Me Too movement, and the political betrayal in SNC-Lavalin. In Ontario, relentless research and digging halted a controversial land swap in the province's 2 million acre greenbelt. Investigative journalism exposed all of these problems. It has the power to change lives, hold leaders to account, and alter the course of history. But it is some of the most challenging and risky reporting. Plus, it's expensive because it can take months or even years to report. The slow decline of investigative work has been felt over the past decade or so.
W5, CTV's long-running investigative series, will no longer be its own show.
W5 recently downsized due to budget cuts. Corus's investigative show, 16 by 9, with its catchy opening theme, canceled. And CBC veteran reporters have even bowed out to save jobs for young journos. In 2023, Vice, the gritty news alternative for younger audiences, filed for bankruptcy. In the US, newspapers are laying off staff en masse, which research has linked to a significant drop in investigative content since 2019. The result? Less public scrutiny on governments and powerful companies, and more opportunities for secrecy, cover-ups, and abuse. Well, a veteran investigative reporter that refuses to let that happen is Rob Cribb. You probably read his byline in the Toronto Star. That's where Rob spent 2 decades leading long-form coverage both at home and abroad. In 2020, he founded the Investigative Journalism Bureau, a nonprofit newsroom training the next generation of journalists willing to dig into complex stories. Today, he is here in studio. Rob, great to have you here.
Good to be here. Thanks for having me.
So, Rob, you've been an investigative reporter since, around 2000. I mean, I think of the Walkerton E. coli crisis at that time. 26 years since then. How has the landscape changed?
It's gotten tougher. It's very tough to do this work today, and way different. Back then, it was there was more money for it. There was a greater commitment to it. There was more money generally in media, and investigative work is tough because it's expensive. It takes a long time. It's legally fraught. Accountants don't like it at news organizations because they think, why are we paying somebody to spend 3 weeks or 3 months or a year on a project, right? When we can have them go out and go to press conferences and file daily news stories. And so, like, on paper, it's indefensible. Investigative work is indefensible economically. The only reason to do it is because you actually believe that there is a purpose.
So what is the purpose, Rob?
Well, to enlighten and inform, to ensure that we as citizens in a democracy have all the information required to allow us to make choices that are in the public interest, right? So it's ultimately to serve the public interest in a way that few other endeavors in life can do. I've come to believe this. Journalism is a very distinct area where we can actually change the world. We can change minds with powerful journalistic work. And when you change minds, it has this cascading effect, right? You see it, you can watch it in front of you. But when we do it well enough, you can see it impact the conversation and the thinking. And that leads to more ideas, and this marketplace of ideas start to fill up, and ultimately the best ideas start to bubble up. And we do things like impact public policy changes or laws or get people arrested that should be arrested. That's a remarkable privilege and power, and it's largely dying off.
When you started your career, I'm sure the newspapers were like this thick.
Yeah.
They've shrunk a little bit.
Yeah.
So I assume there's not a lot of space for investigative work or money?
Space and money are tough. Yeah. So we publish with Postmedia, and they have been remarkably gracious. They give us space, which is very rare today. There's word limit restrictions at most papers that are microscopic. So when you dig deep and you've got a really powerful story with a real compelling narrative, it takes some words to tell those stories. It takes some real estate in the newspaper to tell those stories. And so we've been very fortunate with our partners. They give us the kind of space that we need to do it. We also publish online, so I mean that allows us to sort of ignore the
create your own space.
Yeah. So we can write longer online. So yeah, there's no question. I mean, I remember the Sunday paper was a brick. Like it would land on the porch, you'd hear it. Now it's a feather.
So what's at stake then, Rob, when there's less resources to go around, when there's fewer watchdogs out there?
It means in the morning when you get up as a journalist, you are not allowed or not given the resources to dig deeply enough to ask the difficult questions that are ultimately going to raise the level of awareness. You're going to file stories, for sure. There's no question. And then those stories are going to be valuable and they'll inspire public debate. But investigative journalists sort of come into the picture where the daily news story ends, right? So the daily news story will tell you about an anecdote that happened today. A pedestrian got hit at this particular street corner. The mayor said this about that. The prime minister did this about that. And it's filed. You're filed at 5 o'clock. It's in the paper, and it's part of the daily discussion. But it doesn't answer the why and how. Those are the two really difficult questions. The 5 W's, we can get those done by 5 o'clock. But the why and the how, that takes a lot more time and effort.
Do you think the gaps when it comes to funding, when it comes to resources, leads to misinformation?
I mean, there's no question about it. It's everywhere. We see it all day. We all have that experience where we're literally being fed a pipeline of misinformation and disinformation.
You built an investigative team to fight back against some of that. Tell me about the IJB.
The IJB is a miracle. It's a miracle. We're a team of about a dozen people. We've grown. It's pretty special. It's a nonprofit. It is an act of daily belief in the highest form of the work that we do in journalism. We sit around together. We brainstorm ideas. We try and figure out what is the most important story that we can tell that no one else is telling, and we get to business. And it is a team of people who view this work not as a job. Nobody's there because it's a job. We work way beyond what is reasonable for the amount of money that we get paid. Everyone there believes that what we're doing is special and that we're actually, and we see it, effectively impacting the public's awareness and impacting the public interest. We recently did a big series on the use of dogs in scientific testing that has triggered proposed legislation in Ontario that would effectively ban the use of dogs and cats in scientific research unless it met specific criteria. We learned that there's very lax regulations around this in Canada. We have no real federal teeth, no federal regulatory oversight of this. And of course, it can lead to tremendous abuses.
I think people are wondering, if there's so much importance and we believe in investigative journalism, I mean, how do you keep the lights on?
I have no idea. I don't know. It's a lot of duct tape. We're piecing it together as we go.
But it's a new model.
It's a totally new model.
Right?
Yeah, so we're inventing a model, and that's hard to do.
And what does that look like?
Well, it's a combination of philanthropic. So we are based at the University of Toronto. So we're a nonprofit. We're charity, effectively, because we're at U of T. So we try and raise money philanthropically. We have a couple of people helping us with that, and we've done okay. We've kept the lights on. And then we also have publishing partnerships. So for a long time, it was the Toronto Star. As of May last year, it's the Postmedia chain. So we publish in partnership. They own newspapers across the country. So our work now ends up in the big daily papers across Canada, Montreal Gazette, Ottawa Citizen, Vancouver Sun, Halifax Chronicle.
A lot of collaborations. And with TVO.
And
right?
with TVO. We work with TVO quite a bit, yeah.
Yeah, and is that the future in your mind? Because
100%.
And you think that's scalable for other teams?
100%.
Why?
Historically, if you worked for the Toronto Star, you hated the Globe and Mail and the CBC.
Sure.
And your job was ultimately every day to get up and beat the other guys.
For
right?
sure.
And what we've ended up with in light of these kind of economic restrictions is the fact that we just can't do that anymore. There's just not enough of us to do it.
Yeah, we have some examples, like the Fifth Estate still runs Marketplace, things like that, but it's not sustainable for everybody.
No. And those are what you just cited are both CBC,
Right.
which
Publicly
are
funded.
publicly funded, right?
Right.
So what I eventually figured out, and believe me, I was a lone wolf. I was one of those guys. I was like covetous of everything I got. I kept my stuff to myself. I worked alone. And then I finally figured out that this isn't actually serving the best interests of the story or the public interest. And I became obsessed with trying to figure out if there's a way to make this collaborative model work. So that means working between outlets. So I started working with other outlets. I started building the IJB because I was teaching journalism, and we had these students doing this remarkable work that wouldn't go anywhere. Why wouldn't it go anywhere? Because there was just no mechanism to get it from the classroom into the newsroom. So I started building that. And then so now we have this remarkable mix of students and senior journalists and researchers and academics. And then I figured, university is a good place to actually house this, because what do universities do? They seek knowledge.
Right.
They have researchers. They have very high level of research etiquette and protocols. So that's kind of what journalists do. And so why don't we break down that traditional wall between journalism and academia and bring them into our stories, not just as sound bites, but actual participants from day one.
Partners.
Charting out the story together. And it just became magical. Like the journalism got so much better than anything I could do sitting at my desk by myself with my little pile of papers. And I just became utterly convinced that this is the way to do it.
Rob, you've got a lot of students working for you. How do you ensure quality? Because, the traditional model is you work your way up to investigative. Some of these people are coming right out the gate of school.
Yeah. I just think that that's nonsense, because I taught for 25 years, and there were young journalists coming out of those investigative journalism classes that were top-notch. I put them up against anybody sitting in the newsroom downtown. And they were wired for it. I truly believe that investigative is different. It requires a different mindset, a different wiring. It requires some defect in your DNA to pursue it. But those people that have it, they just have it. And it feels ridiculous to sort of say to them, you're going to have to go do this other thing for 10 years before you can come back and do this. And so one of the great benefits and joys of the Investigative Journalism Bureau is it's actually created a place where that very small number of people who want to do this work desperately and are equipped to do it intellectually can come, like as young journalists, and they can sit around some of the most senior people in the business in Canada and amongst their colleagues, and we all, it's a very level playing field.
Yeah, and full disclosure, our episode producer worked under you as one of those students. Charlie Buckley, and he's, one of the best members of our team. So I think—
You're welcome.
Yeah, there you go. Thank you for the training, right? Thank you for the training. But, you see it.
Yeah.
You see it in the work, and so I commend you. I mean, your team, it's working. And so
Thanks.
The model works. Keep it going, and let's see if other people can replicate.
Thanks so much.
Great to have you on the program today.
Good to be here.
Well, we'll come back to the investigative conversation with some of Rob's proteges, but first, let's see what's causing confusion in the headlines this week. Here's your reality check. Speaking of investigative journalism, one of the profession's most powerful tools is facing a roadblock in Ontario. An FOI, aka Freedom of Information Request, is a formal way of demanding public documents and data from the government. It's a sacred right in a democracy and the backbone of countless groundbreaking investigations. But last week, the province proposed to change the law to keep the records of the Premier cabinet ministers, and other powerful people secret, meaning huge troves of records will no longer be accessible to the public. A reporter asked the procurement minister if he had something to hide.
This government has probably been one of the most transparent governments in the history of Ontario.
But the announcement has sparked outcry from journalists and critics of Premier Ford, including former Liberal Premier Kathleen Wynne, who acknowledged scrutiny is part of the job. Could some turpentine under your tongue be good for your health? Social media may say so, but I'd run from this wellness trend. Turpentine is a byproduct of pine and fir trees and is sometimes used as paint thinner. Paint thinner, people! Some posts have claimed that the oil can provide vague health benefits or cleanse the body. But actual medical experts warn that ingesting turpentine can be toxic, even fatal. It can sometimes appear in things like soaps and perfumes, but those only go on you, not in you. One Canadian toxicologist put it best to AFP. The correct dose of turpentine is 0. Be honest, have you ever asked AI about something really important? Like, say, a legal matter, or even your health. Right now, New York lawmakers are considering cracking down on that kind of advice. If passed, this Senate bill would prohibit chatbots from impersonating certain licensed professionals, like doctors and lawyers. We talked about the dangers of fake and deepfake doctors on our show last week, and legal experts warn about AI errors in Canadian courtrooms. So we'll keep an eye on whether regulation to limit AI chatbots spreads. But in the meantime, your days of asking AI for a consult or a sidebar may be numbered. And that's your reality check. Now you're in the know. As we told you at the beginning of the season, the decline of local news has us worried about the spread of misinformation. But so does a lack of funding and support for investigative work. Let's find out why these types of stories are so important. Emma Jarrett and Stacy Kuznetsova are reporters from the IJB and have some groundbreaking work that they've done around transparency. Great to have you both on the program.
Thank you for having us.
Emma, let me start with you. Your investigation brought to light, years of untold stories in Canada's legal field. What did you find?
We learned that when you go to a Law Society public registry, which is where they list all the lawyers that they regulate and paralegals, you go into their profile, maybe you're thinking about hiring a lawyer. You check them out and they have a clear profile and you think, great, let's go. What you may not know is that there is a potentially significant history behind that lawyer that the regulator is aware of but doesn't disclose on the profile.
So give me some examples of what you found.
Several years ago when we started this, we found that if you had been regulated by a different profession before you became a lawyer and you had been disciplined in that profession, perhaps you had lost whatever certification or status you had with them, that might not necessarily be reflected on your Law Society profile. And it could have been behavior that is, potentially very illegal and very frowned upon, and it just doesn't appear when you transition into your new career as a lawyer.
And a lot of your stories focused on allegations of sexual misconduct. I mean, is that, none of that's showing up?
Not always. Sometimes, if it's a serious criminal charge, the Law Society will open their own investigation, and only when they reach the point of saying, all right, we think we have enough here to proceed in the disciplinary process, we're going to trigger a formal investigation, that alert will show up on somebody's profile, but that previous investigative part, when they're sort of triaging the complaint, you have no idea.
Okay, so there's open allegations on the table and you're just looking for a lawyer and you have no idea that there could be multiple complaints.
Yeah.
Oh. Okay, Stacy, you dealt with a similar type of project, but on the medical side of things. So tell me about that.
So Bad Practice was the biggest international collaboration the IJB has ever been involved in. It was led by the Organized Crime and Corruption Reporting Project. The nut of the project was that doctors, in many cases, are able to leave behind their troubling pasts, such as being reprimanded or even being banned from practicing medicine. They're able to leave that history behind in one jurisdiction and start fresh in a completely new one, with very often none or minimal disclosure to the public about those previous histories.
Did it change the way you feel about your doctor? How you look at doctors?
I think being an investigative reporter changes the way you look at any profession.
Fair enough. Fair enough. Our show focuses on untrue statements and claims, but isn't a lie by omission still a lie?
I personally would think so. that comes from a place of, when I make a decision about something, I want it to be an informed choice, whether it's about my doctor, whether it's about my lawyer. I just want to have the facts. If somebody has a past, if they've made a mistake, that doesn't necessarily disqualify them from, either myself or another person saying, no, I still want to go to you. I'm still going to trust you with my care or my legal trouble, whatever it is. But I want to have the information. So to me, omitting information that is relevant to my decision, it does feel like a lie. It feels like covering up.
Yeah.
And to build on Emma's point here, I think we expect transparency from everybody, but for lawyers, for doctors, for professions where they encounter people in their most vulnerable and they trust these people with the decisions about their medical care, trust them with legal advice that could be life-changing for them, in those professions especially, we expect a higher level of transparency.
Would you call this deception, Stacey?
I don't really know if it matters whether or not I would call it deception. I think what matters is that information that would have changed your opinion of somebody, would have affected your decision on whether or not this is the doctor I'm going to go to or this is the lawyer that I'm going to hire, that information is being withheld from you in some cases. And so you're not able to make an informed decision.
I want to come back, Emma, to your project, because that was not a project that took a couple months. How long did that take?
Many years.
Many years.
Yeah, it was interrupted in the middle by COVID and the pandemic, but we're still working on it. And we published the first story 2.5 years ago, maybe 3 years ago. So it keeps going.
And you have seen at least prospect of some change.
Yeah, so the Law Society last year said that they were going to take a closer look at their bylaws that they're governed by, and specifically what they are or are not going to disclose going forward. And so they've agreed in principle to make some changes that would bring more transparency to the visibility for the public on the public registry of, what's my lawyer's past.
We'll see what happens, but if that comes through, it could be a huge win. Stacey, I want to ask, you are still in school, 22 years old, doing investigative journalism. What does that mean to you?
It really is a privilege to be doing this work and to find a place that not only allows you to do deep investigative work as a student that can change policy, that can change the world, but also mentors you in doing that and is deeply committed to your professional growth, to supporting you in pursuing projects that you're passionate about, is very, very rare. And so we're all very privileged and recognize that privilege every day that we come to work.
It's a dream job?
It is a dream job. I have the best job in the world and I'm the luckiest person, yeah.
Yeah, so important. Investigative work, incredible part of democracy, an incredible part of holding leaders to account. So I thank you ladies for all the work that you do.
Thank you.
We asked Ontario regulators for doctors and lawyers to respond to the IJB's investigations. A spokesperson for the College of Physicians and Surgeons said they are committed to balancing transparency with fairness for both the public and the privacy of its members. The college added that it reviews the practice history of doctors before they provide care in Ontario and works to ensure that physicians meet the professional and ethical standards expected in the province. We did not hear back from Ontario's Law Society.
Not sure who to trust in a world of misinformation? Come to Big If True. Find us on Instagram and YouTube. Visit our website for extra content. Email us to get your thoughts on the show.
I'll leave you with a quote from the legendary Nellie Bly, who went undercover as a mental patient to expose abuse at a New York asylum, and whose reporting led to major reforms. Did I think I had the courage to go through such an ordeal as the mission would demand? I said I could, and I would, and I did. Our thanks to the Investigative Journalism Bureau for all the important work they do to support a more transparent information environment. Thanks for watching. We'll see you next Sunday or anytime online.